You didn't find this video by accident. Something in you has already completed a cycle, and this message appears because that completion has stabilized. Recognition always arrives after the shift, never before it. If this is landing calmly instead of urgently, that's the signal. The observer phase you've been moving through is finished. For a long time, your role was not to act, fix, chase, or force anything into form. Your role was to watch without interference. To remain present while outcomes refuse to move. To sit inside uncertainty without collapsing into panic, hope, or control. That phase was not passive, and it was not wasted time. It was the most precise calibration your consciousness could undergo. And now it is complete. This is not about finally understanding something intellectually. Understanding comes later. What ended first was a mode of being. The version of you that waited, checked, scanned reality for proof, and tried to adjust yourself based on what you saw has already dissolved. You may not have noticed it happen. Identity shifts are quiet. They don't announce themselves. They register as a subtle loss of urgency, a softening of grasp, a strange neutrality where intensity used to live. That neutrality is not emptiness. It is readiness. The observer phase exists to remove unconscious collapse. When attention is reactive, reality becomes reactive. When emotion is unstable, timelines fragment. You were not being delayed. You were being stabilized. And stabilization is what grants access. Not effort. Not belief. Not repetition. Coherence. If this message feels less like motivation and more like a reminder, that's because it isn't teaching you something new. It's naming something that already happened. The work was internal, invisible, and non-negotiable. And it's done. The version of you that needed to wait no longer exists, which is why waiting stopped making sense. This is why this message could only appear now. Before this moment, it would have been noise. Before this moment, it would have triggered seeking. Now it lands as recognition. That distinction matters. Reality mirrors inner state, not words. And your inner state has already crossed the threshold. You don't need to prepare. Preparation already occurred. You don't need to be convinced. Conviction was forged through stillness, not persuasion. This is simply the acknowledgement that the phase of observation has closed and a different relationship with reality is now available to you. Nothing is being demanded of you here. No action is required. No practice is being assigned. The only thing happening is a clean energetic closure. The door behind you has already shut, and the one in front of you is not opened by pushing. It opens by standing still as who you are now. Let this settle without analysis. Let it register without excitement. Calm recognition is the correct response. Like the video now as a confirmation that this recognition has landed. What you experienced as stagnation was not a pause imposed on you. It was precision. Watching without being able to interfere was the assignment, even though it felt unnatural to everything you were taught about progress. You were conditioned to believe movement equals advancement, that action proves worthiness, that effort creates momentum. The observer phase dismantled that conditioning by removing your ability to act in the ways you were accustomed to. Not as punishment, but as training. Stillness was the environment required to retrain your relationship with reality. When you are allowed to act freely, unconscious patterns hide inside motion. You mistake activity for alignment and urgency for truth. But when movement is removed, what remains is your raw relationship to uncertainty. That is what was being tested. Not your patience as a virtue, but your emotional stability as a frequency. Watching was the work because watching revealed where you still tried to control outcomes emotionally. Every time frustration arose, it wasn't a failure of discipline. It was resistance surfacing so it could dissolve. Every impulse to interfere exposed a belief that reality needed your tension to move. Each wave of impatience showed where trust had not yet stabilized. You weren't being asked to suppress these reactions. You are being asked to feel them without acting from them. Non-interference is not passivity. It is mastery. It is the ability to remain present in the face of contrast without collapsing into identification with it. When you watched your life without being able to steer it, you were learning to separate awareness from reaction. That separation is what creates coherence. Without it, attention fractures. With it, attention becomes stable enough to hold higher-order outcomes without distortion. Emotional neutrality does not mean numbness. It means responsiveness without compulsion. You are learning how to experience lack without becoming lack. To see delay without becoming doubt. To witness uncertainty without generating fear. That is not something that can be practiced conceptually. It can only be forged through lived experience where the old tools stop working. The frustration you felt was not proof you were misaligned. It was proof the old mechanisms were losing authority. Resistance intensifies right before it dissolves because it senses irrelevance approaching. When action no longer produced results, the mind panicked. When effort stopped yielding leverage, identity trembled. That trembling was not collapse. It was recalibration. By watching without action, your nervous system learned safety without control. Your awareness learned to stay present without needing reassurance. Your attention learned to remain steady without chasing outcomes. This is why nothing external needed to change during that phase. The refinement was internal, and internal refinement precedes all durable change. Alignment was not achieved by doing more. It was refined by doing less until only truth remained. The watching stripped away false agency and revealed real agency. Not the kind that manipulates reality, but the kind that resonates with it. That resonance cannot be rushed. It emerges when interference ends. Nothing about that phase was accidental. The stillness trained you to become a clean signal. And now that the signal is clear, movement is no longer chaotic. It is precise. The most important shift did not arrive with evidence. It didn't announce itself through changed circumstances or visible rewards. It happened quietly, internally, while nothing on the surface appeared to move. That is why it was easy to miss. Identity does not transform with noise. It transforms with subtraction. At some point during the observer phase, you stopped bracing against the moment. Not dramatically. Not intentionally. There was no declaration, no final decision. The gripping simply loosened. The constant internal checking softened. The need for reality to reassure you relaxed. And because this happened without spectacle, the mind didn't register it as progress. But consciousness did. The true change always happens before proof because proof is an effect, not a cause. Reality does not lead identity. Identity leads reality. When the inner state stabilizes, the external world lags behind, rearranging itself at a slower density. You didn't feel powerful. You felt quieter. You didn't feel certain. You felt less compelled to ask. That was the signal. This is how identity shifts when it is real. Old versions of you were fueled by tension. They monitored outcomes. They tried to anticipate disappointment. They used effort as a way to manage uncertainty. That identity could not survive prolonged stillness. It needed movement to exist. When movement was removed, it slowly dissolved. What replaced it was not a new persona. It was the absence of one. A neutral presence that no longer defined itself by what was happening or not happening. You didn't become someone better. You became someone less reactive. And that is infinitely more powerful. Recognition is not something you earn after the change. Recognition is what seals it. When consciousness recognizes itself in a new configuration, the phase closes. That is what is happening now. This moment is not the beginning. It is the acknowledgement that the beginning already occurred and stabilized. This is why you don't feel desperate to apply what you're hearing. There is no urgency. No scramble to fix or manifest or optimize. The compulsion has left. What remains is a quiet readiness. A sense that something is available, but not because you are reaching for it. Because you are no longer in the way. Nothing needs to be forced from here. Force belongs to the identity that believed effort was required to be chosen by reality. That identity has already stepped aside. What comes next is not about trying harder. It is about understanding what is now possible because the internal structure has changed. The mechanics will make sense later because they will be felt, not memorized. For now, all that matters is this recognition. The observer phase did its work. The shift happened in silence. And the fact that you are here, receiving this calmly rather than urgently, confirms that the transition is complete. You didn't miss the moment. You became it. Reality does not move in response to wanting. It responds to coherence. This is the part that is rarely understood because desire feels active, urgent, alive. Coherence feels quiet, almost invisible. Yet one destabilizes the field while the other allows it to reorganize. What you experienced as delay was not resistance from reality. It was reality waiting for your signal to become stable enough to trust. Before anything becomes solid, it exists as potential. Not metaphorically, but functionally. Life unfolds inside a field of possibilities where multiple outcomes coexist simultaneously. At any moment, there are countless versions of what could happen next, all equally available, all equally real in potential. Nothing is chosen until attention stabilizes long enough to allow one path to crystallize. When attention is fragmented, outcomes cannot settle. When emotion swings between hope and fear, timelines flicker but do not lock. Desire pulls in multiple directions at once. It reaches forward while simultaneously bracing for disappointment. That internal contradiction sends mixed instructions into the field. The result is suspension. Not punishment. Protection. Stability was required because unstable attention collapses unstable results. You were not being kept from what you wanted. You were being kept from selecting something prematurely that you would later have to undo. The observer phase slowed everything down so your signal could become clean. So your focus could stop oscillating. So your internal state could hold one frequency without interference. Think of the field as responsive but precise. It does not guess what you mean. It responds to what you are consistently broadcasting. If your inner state changes every time circumstances shift, the field cannot mirror anything durable. So it waits. Not passively, but intelligently. Waiting until your attention stops reacting and starts resting. This is why desire alone never moved things forward. Desire is a request formed from absence. Coherence is an instruction formed from alignment. One reaches outward. The other stabilizes inward. The field responds to the latter because it contains no contradiction. Delays were protective because they prevented collapse under the wrong conditions. They preserved optionality until you were ready to select without distortion. You weren't denied momentum. You were spared consequences. Outcomes that arrive before stability demand maintenance. Outcomes that arrive after coherence sustain themselves. Once your internal state stopped fluctuating with appearances, the field could finally register a clear signal. Not because you believed harder, but because you stopped arguing with the moment emotionally. When neutrality stabilized, potential no longer needed to remain suspended. It could begin reorganizing without resistance. Nothing needed to be forced because nothing was missing. The pause was not emptiness. It was incubation. And incubation always looks like nothing from the outside. Now that coherence is present, movement does not need to be initiated. It emerges. The field does not need to be persuaded. It responds automatically when contradiction ends. This is why things begin to shift only after you stop trying to make them shift. Reality was not withholding. It was listening. And it waited until your signal became steady enough to answer clearly. Emotion is not a reaction to reality. It is the instruction reality responds to. Thought describes. Emotion commands. This is why nothing changed when you tried to think your way into a different life. Thought alone has no charge. Emotion carries frequency, and frequency is what the field mirrors. Every emotional state broadcasts a signal. Not symbolically, but functionally. Expansion and contraction are not moral judgments. They are feedback systems. Expansion indicates coherence. Contraction indicates resistance. Neither is wrong. Both are information. During the observer phase, you were learning to read this guidance without obeying it compulsively. When you felt expansive, calm, present, even without answers, your signal was clean. When you felt tight, anxious, urgent, your signal fragmented. The work was not to chase expansion or suppress contraction. It was to stop letting contraction dictate action. To feel it fully without moving from it. That restraint is what stabilized your frequency. For most of your life, emotion was used unconsciously. You reacted first, interpreted later. Fear collapsed timelines before they could mature. Hope reached forward while doubt pulled back. Desire surged while trust wavered. The field received mixed instructions and responded accordingly. Not by denying you, but by reflecting inconsistency. Calm receptivity is powerful because it contains no contradiction. It does not push forward or pull back. It allows. And allowing is not waiting. It is alignment without tension. When emotion rests in neutrality, the signal becomes precise. There is nothing competing for attention. Nothing leaking energy. Nothing distorting the instruction. This is why forcing never worked. Force carries urgency, and urgency implies lack. Lack is a fragmented frequency. When you tried to visualize harder, affirm louder, or control outcomes more tightly, you were amplifying the signal that something was missing. The field responded faithfully by maintaining that absence. Receptivity does not beg reality to move. It creates the conditions where movement is inevitable. When emotion stabilizes, thought becomes secondary. Words become unnecessary. The field reads coherence directly. This is why shifts begin after you stop trying to make them happen. Expansion is not excitement. It is spaciousness. It feels like ease, openness, quiet confidence. Contraction is not danger. It is information asking to be witnessed without obedience. During the observer phase, you learn to stay present with both without being driven by either. That is emotional mastery. Now emotion no longer hijacks attention. It informs it. You don't need to suppress what you feel. You don't need to amplify positivity. You simply allow emotion to pass through without assigning it authority. In doing so, you remain coherent regardless of internal weather. This is the difference between unconscious creation and conscious participation. Reality responds not to what you want, but to what you are consistently broadcasting. And now your emotional signal is stable enough to be trusted. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and remain within it. Effort was never the lever that moved reality. It only appeared that way because effort creates sensation, and sensation feels like causation. You were taught that if nothing is happening, you must not be doing enough. So you pushed. You refined techniques. You added discipline. You tried to become better at trying. And for a while, that seemed to work, because effort can create short-term movement. But it cannot create coherence. Control and allowing are not opposites in degree. They are different operating systems. Control assumes the world is external and unresponsive unless pressured. Allowing recognizes that reality is already responsive and only distorted by interference. The observer phase existed to expose this difference, not conceptually, but experientially. This is why the old methods stopped working. Not because they were wrong, but because you outgrew the level of consciousness that required them. Techniques are scaffolding. They are useful until the structure can stand on its own. When you reached the point where effort created resistance instead of results, it wasn't failure. It was readiness. Effort always contains a hidden premise, that what is desired is not here yet. That premise broadcasts lack, no matter how positive the language around it sounds. You can repeat affirmations calmly, but if they are fueled by urgency, the field reads urgency. You can visualize beautifully, but if the emotion underneath is trying to escape the present moment, the signal contradicts itself. Being does not mean doing nothing. It means action no longer comes from tension. It arises from alignment. When being replaces doing, movement becomes precise instead of frantic. Fewer actions produce more impact because they are no longer compensatory. They are expressions, not attempts. During the observer phase, effort was removed so you could feel the difference directly. You learned how exhausting it was to try to hold reality together through force. You learned how little leverage control actually had. And you learned, quietly, that when you stopped pushing, things didn't fall apart. They stabilized. This is the moment where many people panic and assume they've lost momentum. In truth, momentum changes direction. It no longer comes from striving. It comes from coherence. From the absence of internal conflict. From the simplicity of presence. Allowing is not passive. It is deeply active at the level that matters. It keeps the signal clean. It removes distortion. It lets the field do what it has always been designed to do, respond to stable identity. You are no longer meant to convince reality. You are meant to reflect it clearly. That clarity does not require effort. It requires honesty with your internal state and the willingness to stop forcing outcomes that no longer match who you are. The collapse of old methods is not the end of creation. It is the end of struggle-based creation. What replaces it is quieter, but far more reliable. Comment with the words, "I am ready," to anchor this timeline. Desire doesn't end with disappointment. It ends with completion. That distinction matters, because what you may have felt recently was not loss of motivation or emotional withdrawal. It was the quiet disappearance of urgency. The hunger softened. The grasp relaxed. And for a moment, you may have wondered if something was wrong. It wasn't. You were exiting the frequency of wanting. Desire is not wrong, but it is specific. It is generated from a sense of separation between who you are and what you believe will make you whole. Even when desire is dressed up as ambition or vision, its underlying signal is absence. It says, something is not here yet. That signal can move things initially, but it cannot sustain alignment. Eventually, it collapses under its own weight. During the observer phase, that collapse began naturally. Not because you forced yourself to stop wanting, but because your internal state changed. You no longer needed outcomes to stabilize your sense of self. Peace stopped being conditional. And when peace becomes unconditional, desire loses its leverage. This is where many misinterpret what's happening. They call it apathy. They assume they've lost drive. But apathy is contraction. It is resignation. What you experienced was expansion without craving. A calm neutrality that doesn't push away life or pull it closer. It simply allows it to approach on its own terms. Peaceful detachment is not indifference. It is sovereignty. It means outcomes no longer define you. They meet you instead of completing you. When desire dissolves, you don't stop caring. You stop clinging. And in that absence of clinging, alignment becomes effortless. Outgrowing an outcome doesn't mean you won't experience it. It means you no longer broadcast lack around it. You are no longer reaching from below. You are meeting it from level ground. This is why manifestation often occurs after desire fades, not while it's strongest. The field responds to coherence, not craving. What dissolved was not your vision. It was the emotional dependency attached to it. You didn't abandon what you wanted. You stopped needing it to validate your existence. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. It removes pressure. It removes urgency. It removes distortion. In this post-desire state, reality no longer feels like something to chase. It feels like something that approaches. You're no longer scanning the horizon. You're present. And presence is the most magnetic state there is. This is not giving up. It is graduating. The version of you that needed desire as fuel has completed its role. What replaces it is steadier, quieter, and far more powerful. You are no longer pulled forward by lack. You are anchored in sufficiency. And from sufficiency, creation happens without strain. This is the frequency of having, not hoping. Not all signs are meant to excite you. In fact, the most important ones rarely do. What you may have noticed recently are small repetitions, subtle patterns, quiet anomalies that register more as curiosity than revelation. A number appearing again. A phrase resurfacing. A symbol repeating itself without emotional weight. That neutrality is not accidental. It is the point. Synchronicities are not rewards and they are not messages to decode. They are calibration pings. Before reality collapses into larger, more tangible outcomes, the field tests stability. It checks whether your attention can notice without attaching. Whether awareness can register without reaching for meaning. Whether recognition can occur without emotional charge. In earlier phases, signs felt electric because they were needed as reassurance. They fed hope. They temporarily stabilized belief. But now, excitement would actually signal instability. It would indicate dependency. The field is not interested in amplifying dependency. It is interested in confirming coherence. Neutral noticing is the test. When a pattern appears and you don't chase it, analyze it, or inflate it into prophecy, you demonstrate steadiness. You show that your attention no longer swings wildly between significance and disappointment. You notice, and you remain centered. That response tells the field that your signal is clean. Stability must be verified before larger collapses of reality occur because larger outcomes carry momentum. They require maintenance through identity, not emotion. If attention still seeks validation, the structure won't hold. So the field starts small. It sends quiet repetitions. It observes your response. Not consciously, but mechanically. When you acknowledge a sign calmly, without urgency or interpretation, you send a clear return signal. You say, awareness is present. There is no grasping here. There is no need to be convinced. That is when the system registers readiness. This is why signs now feel oddly understated. They don't interrupt your day. They don't demand action. They don't ask to be shared or deciphered. They simply appear and pass. And your ability to let them pass without inflation is exactly what qualifies you for what comes next. Emotional charge collapses possibility too quickly. It locks meaning before structure is ready. Neutrality keeps the field open while alignment finalizes. This is why excitement used to stall things and calm recognition now accelerates them. You are no longer meant to live by omens. You are meant to live by coherence. Signs are no longer instructions. They are confirmations that the connection is stable. That attention is responsive without being reactive. Nothing is being promised in these moments. Nothing needs to be interpreted. The field is simply confirming that the channel is clear. That your presence is steady. That your awareness does not need to be stimulated to remain engaged. When stability is confirmed, collapse follows naturally. Larger shifts don't announce themselves with signs. They arrive as facts. Quietly. Inevitably. Without spectacle. The neutrality you bring to the small signals is what allows the larger ones to become real. Some problems don't end with solutions. They end with silence. One day you notice that something which once consumed your attention no longer does. Not because it was fixed, not because it disappeared completely, but because it lost its weight. The emotional charge evaporated. And without that charge, the problem no longer has gravity. This is how completion actually happens. Lessons don't conclude with victories. They conclude with irrelevance. When an experience has given you everything it was designed to give, it no longer needs to stay loud. It doesn't need resolution. It simply fades from the center of your awareness. Contrast exists to refine alignment. It introduces pressure so coherence can be forged. But once that coherence stabilizes, the contrast has no remaining function. It stops producing friction because there is nothing left to press against. The lesson has integrated. The system shuts the module down. You may look back now and feel surprised by how little you care. A situation that once felt defining now feels distant, almost abstract. You remember that it mattered, but you can't quite access the intensity anymore. That isn't suppression. It's completion. Emotional charge only persists when identity is still entangled with the outcome. Problems persist when they are fed attention, reaction, and meaning. When attention withdraws naturally, without effort or avoidance, the structure collapses on its own. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like scaffolding being removed after a building is finished. This is why some challenges didn't resolve the way you expected. They didn't need to. Resolution would have implied continued engagement. Irrelevance means graduation. You moved beyond the frequency where that issue could locate you. It no longer matches who you are being. Nothing was wasted in those experiences. Every moment of frustration, every cycle of repetition refined something in you. It sharpened awareness. It exposed attachments. It trained neutrality. Once that training was complete, the problem had no jurisdiction left. Contrast is not punishment. It is calibration. It applies pressure until alignment stabilizes. When alignment holds, pressure is released. The field does not continue running programs that are no longer necessary. It conserves energy. It moves on. This can feel strange because the mind expects closure through explanation. But consciousness closes loops through embodiment. You don't need to understand why the problem lost power. The loss of power is the understanding. You didn't escape the issue. You transcended the level of identity that required it. And that shift doesn't come with applause. It comes with quiet. With space. With a sense that something has ended without needing a reason. When problems lose their gravity, they stop defining you. And when they stop defining you, reality reorganizes accordingly. This is not avoidance. It is evolution. The module completed itself the moment you no longer needed it to teach you anything. Authority does not arrive as a surge of confidence. It returns as stillness that no longer questions itself. What is integrating now is not a new skill, but two aspects of you that were temporarily separated for training purposes. Awareness learned to stand alone. Power waited. And now they meet again, not in force, but in coherence. During the observer phase, awareness was refined without expression. You learned to watch without collapsing into reaction. You learned to remain present without needing control. Power, meanwhile, was dormant by design. Not absent, just withheld until it could be trusted. What returns now is not raw force, but calibrated authority. Authority is not dominance. It is alignment so complete that reality no longer resists you. It does not require assertion. It does not announce itself. It is recognized, not performed. When awareness and power integrate, there is no longer a sense of looking outward for permission. Seeking ends naturally because there is nothing outside of you that can confirm what you already are. This is the moment where the perspective flips. You are no longer a person attempting to influence a separate world. You are consciousness itself, experiencing form. The field you once tried to navigate is revealed as an extension of your own state. Not something to manipulate, but something that responds automatically to who you are being. Recognition-based authority is different from learned authority. Learned authority relies on repetition, validation, and reinforcement. Recognition-based authority emerges when the system no longer contradicts itself. When internal alignment reaches a point where there is no argument between intention and presence. That silence is authority. Seeking ends here because seeking implies distance. It implies that something essential is missing. But the observer phase stripped away everything non-essential until only awareness remained. And awareness, when recognized as primary, needs nothing added to it. Power returns not to fill a gap, but to express what is already whole. You may notice that questions dissolve rather than get answered. That curiosity becomes quieter. That the urge to search for the next teaching weakens. This is not stagnation. It is stabilization. When authority returns, the system no longer needs external reference points to orient itself. This does not make you passive. It makes you centered. Action that arises from this state is not corrective. It is expressive. It does not seek to fix reality. It allows reality to reorganize around coherence. You are not stepping into authority. You are remembering it. And remembering is always gentle. It does not require proof. It does not need repetition. It simply becomes obvious. From here on, creation is not about becoming something else. It is about allowing what you already are to move without obstruction. Awareness and power are no longer separate roles. They function as one field. The seeking phase is complete because the source has been recognized. And recognition is the only authority that lasts. Seeing is no longer passive. It never truly was, but now that awareness and authority are integrated, the effect becomes unmistakable. Observation is not a record of reality. It is the mechanism through which reality organizes itself. What you give sustained attention to does not merely persist. It forms. For most of your life, attention was scattered. It moved reactively, pulled by emotion, memory, anticipation. Strategy was required because attention could not be trusted to remain steady. Plans compensated for inconsistency. Effort compensated for fragmentation. But when presence stabilizes, strategy becomes redundant. Attention is creative force because it collapses potential into form. Not by force, not by decision, but by coherence. When you are fully present, without internal argument, the field receives a single instruction. There is no contradiction to resolve. No competing signal. The timeline that matches that state locks naturally. This is why being present now does more than planning ever did. Presence does not reach forward or pull backward. It occupies the only point where creation can occur. The present moment is not a bridge to the future. It is the selection point. When attention rests here without tension, it chooses automatically. Seeing becomes doing because the act of noticing from coherence selects reality without effort. You don't need to visualize outcomes when your state already implies them. You don't need to manage appearances when your presence is stable. The field does not require instructions spelled out in thought. It responds to the quality of awareness itself. Strategy belongs to a fragmented system. It assumes obstacles must be navigated, variables controlled, outcomes engineered. Presence dissolves that framework. It does not eliminate complexity, but it removes resistance. Movement emerges from alignment rather than calculation. This does not mean you stop acting. It means action is no longer compensatory. It is not driven by fear of missing out or pressure to correct the present. It arises as a natural extension of clarity. Often fewer actions occur, but each carries more weight because it is not diluted by doubt. When attention is coherent, timelines do not need to be chased. They converge. You may notice opportunities aligning without pursuit, conversations unfolding without effort, decisions resolving themselves without analysis. This is not luck. It is the natural consequence of sustained presence. The mind may still try to intervene. It may look for something to optimize, something to manage. But you can feel the difference now. You can sense when attention is drifting into strategy versus resting in being. One feels tight. The other feels open. Seeing from presence collapses the path that requires the least resistance. It does not ask which future you want. It selects the one that matches who you are being now. This is why control becomes unnecessary. You are no longer steering from the outside. You are orienting from within. Observation has become directive not because you try to direct, but because nothing inside you is pulling against itself anymore. And when inner conflict ends, reality no longer hesitates. What you see, you become. What you become, reality reflects. Seeing is doing because being is choosing. The field does not need to be pushed into motion. It reorganizes automatically when resistance ends. What you are experiencing now is not effortlessness because you stopped caring. It is effortlessness because identity has stabilized. And identity, not action, is what the field responds to. Magnetism is not created by pulling. It emerges from coherence. When there is no internal argument about who you are, what you deserve, or where you are going, reality no longer meets friction. It aligns. Allowing is not waiting for something to happen. It is the absence of contradiction that lets movement occur naturally. The present moment is the only point where this reorganization can take place. Not because the future doesn't matter, but because the future is selected here. When attention is fully anchored now, without urgency or resistance, the field receives a complete signal. There is nothing missing from it. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be corrected. Effort used to feel necessary because identity was unstable. Action compensated for uncertainty. When you didn't trust who you were being, you tried to manage outcomes. When identity stabilizes, management becomes unnecessary. Reality begins to mirror the internal state without instruction because there is no interference distorting the signal. This is why things start moving when you stop trying to move them. Not as a reward, but as a mechanical response. Allowing removes noise. It does not direct the field. It clarifies it. And clarity is what activates response. Identity-based response means the field mirrors consistency, not desire. When you consistently embody calm presence, reality reflects ease. When you embody sufficiency, circumstances rearrange to match it. This happens without conscious direction because identity is continuous. It doesn't switch on and off the way techniques do. You may notice that outcomes now arrive without emotional buildup. There is no dramatic anticipation. No sense of arrival. Things simply show up as if they were always meant to. That is because the alignment occurred before the event. The event is just catching up. Allowing does not mean disengagement. It means participation without force. You are still involved. You still respond. But response flows from presence rather than tension. From clarity rather than urgency. The field recognizes this difference immediately. The present moment holds everything needed for creation because it contains your entire identity signal. When you are here fully, the future is already informed. Nothing needs to be projected. Nothing needs to be imagined. The field reads what is, not what is hoped for. This is why effort fades naturally. Not because you disciplined yourself into ease, but because ease became accurate. The more accurate your internal state becomes, the less correction is required externally. Reality responds without effort because effort was never the cause. It was the compensation. And now that identity is coherent, compensation is no longer needed. The field does what it has always done best. It mirrors truth when distortion ends. Choosing no longer feels like decision-making. It feels like recognition. Not because options disappeared, but because clarity replaced effort. When identity stabilizes, timelines don't compete. They sort themselves according to resonance. What aligns moves closer. What doesn't quietly falls away without needing rejection. Strain was never part of true choice. Strain came from trying to select outcomes while standing in uncertainty. It required comparison, justification, and mental effort because identity was still in flux. You were choosing from the mind, not from coherence. Now the center of gravity has shifted. Choice emerges from being rather than thinking. Conscious timeline selection does not involve imagining futures or evaluating possibilities. It happens through alignment. As your internal state remains consistent, certain paths simply become unavailable. Not blocked, but irrelevant. You don't resist them. You just don't feel pulled toward them anymore. This is how choice refines itself naturally. Clarity is not intensity. It is simplicity. It feels like knowing without explanation. When clarity is present, effort dissolves because there is nothing to push against. You don't need to convince yourself. You don't need to generate motivation. Movement happens because there is no internal friction slowing it down. Identity is the selector. Not preference. Not desire. Identity determines which timelines can intersect with you at all. As that identity stabilizes, the field responds by presenting only what matches. This is why choosing now feels lighter. You are no longer selecting against something. You are aligning with what is already consistent. Natural choosing does not announce itself with certainty or excitement. It feels calm. Almost obvious. The mind may still look for reasons, but reasons arrive after the movement, not before. Action follows alignment instead of attempting to create it. This is why forcing choice backfires. Force reintroduces doubt. It implies that something important might be missed, that the wrong move could be made. That fear belongs to an identity that believed outcomes determined worth. That identity has already loosened its grip. Now, when something is aligned, you feel it without tension. When it is not, you feel no resistance, only absence of pull. This absence is not loss. It is refinement. The field does not need you to reject what no longer matches. It simply stops presenting it as relevant. Choice becomes effortless because you are no longer choosing to become something. You are choosing from what you already are. That distinction removes pressure. It removes urgency. It removes the fear of making mistakes. There are no wrong choices when identity is coherent. There are only resonant paths and neutral ones. This is not indecision. It is precision. Fewer choices appear because fewer are necessary. The system simplifies itself when coherence is high. Complexity was never a sign of abundance. It was a sign of fragmentation. As identity continues to stabilize, choosing becomes an extension of presence. You don't scan the horizon. You respond to what arrives. And what arrives is already filtered by alignment. There is nothing to force here. Nothing to chase. Choice now feels like stepping forward because the ground is already solid. You are no longer moving in and out of creation. Creation is no longer something you initiate. It is the condition you live from. This is what it means to live as the signal rather than someone trying to send one. Reality does not wait for instruction anymore because instruction is continuous. It is embedded in who you are being. When identity stabilizes, creation becomes ambient. It is no longer episodic or dependent on mood, technique, or focus windows. The field organizes around you the way iron filings organize around a magnet, not because the magnet is trying, but because it is coherent. That coherence is not effortful. It is structural. Being the signal means your internal state does not fluctuate dramatically based on external conditions. You respond, but you are not pulled off center. Presence remains intact even as circumstances change. That steadiness is what allows reality to reorganize smoothly rather than in bursts. Consistency matters more than intensity. This does not mean contrast disappears. Contrast remains, but its role changes. It is no longer something to overcome or escape. It becomes refinement. It highlights subtleties. It fine-tunes alignment. When contrast appears now, it does not destabilize identity. It simply provides information. You don't regress when it happens. You integrate. Living as the signal means you no longer personalize fluctuations in the field. You don't interpret them as tests or setbacks. You recognize them as part of an ongoing calibration process that never implies failure. Refinement is continuous, not corrective. It sharpens clarity without threatening stability. Because creation is now identity-based, you don't need to maintain it consciously. You don't monitor yourself. You don't correct your thoughts constantly. You don't manage vibration. Those behaviors belong to a phase where coherence was fragile. Now coherence is structural. It holds without supervision. Reality responds to this by simplifying. Less friction. Fewer dramatic swings. More direct alignment. Things arrive without fanfare. They leave without disruption. You stop labeling experiences as manifestations because the distinction between inner and outer loses relevance. Everything feels participatory rather than earned. Being the signal does not make you static. It makes you fluid without losing center. Movement happens, but it does not pull you into reaction. You adapt without abandoning presence. This is what allows creation to remain continuous instead of cyclical. The field reads identity constantly. There is no off switch. When you live as the signal, you are always informing reality of what is possible through your state of being. That information is clean because it is consistent. There is nothing to override it. You are no longer tuning in and out of alignment. You are alignment expressing itself through form. Contrast refines that expression, not by challenging it, but by clarifying it. This is not the end of creation. It is the stabilization of it. From here, reality does not need to be managed. It needs to be met. And you are already doing that by being exactly where you are, as you are. There is nothing left to complete. That is the most important thing to understand now. Not because everything you want has appeared, but because the phase that required waiting, watching, and stabilizing has ended. Completion does not announce itself with urgency. It settles. It feels obvious in hindsight. And once it settles, there is no reason to keep looking back. The observer phase is over because it has already done its work. It trained awareness to remain steady without interference. It refined emotion until it no longer dictated action. It stripped identity down to coherence. There is no benefit in revisiting it, questioning it, or trying to extract more meaning from it. What integrated has integrated. What ended has ended. Finality does not mean nothing more will happen. It means nothing more needs to be proven. There is no threshold left to cross, no readiness left to earn. Calm certainty replaces anticipation. Not because certainty guarantees outcomes, but because certainty no longer depends on them. This is not a moment that requires celebration or intensity. Intensity belongs to beginnings and struggles. This is a closure. A clean one. The kind that allows energy to move forward without dragging unfinished loops behind it. When something is complete, it stops demanding attention. That is how you know. You may notice a sense of quiet resolve instead of excitement. A grounded presence instead of anticipation. That is the correct response. There is no rush from here because nothing is being chased. Creation continues, but it no longer needs a starting signal. It flows from identity rather than intention. What matters now is not what you do next, but how you stand where you are. Recognition has already occurred. Authority has already returned. Alignment has already stabilized. There is no need to mark this moment with effort. Let it register as a fact. This recognition is not personal. It is collective. Many reach this point quietly and never name it. Naming it here does not elevate one person over another. It simply allows coherence to be witnessed. When recognition is shared, it stabilizes faster. When it is acknowledged, it integrates deeper. If you are hearing this with calm rather than urgency, that calm is the evidence. If nothing in you feels compelled to argue or reach or doubt, that stillness is the closure. There is nothing left to understand before moving forward, because understanding was never the requirement. Being was. From this point on, you don't need reminders that you are aligned. Alignment does not need reinforcement. It sustains itself. You don't need to revisit the observer phase to make sure it worked. It ended precisely because it did. Let this be the moment you stop checking whether you are ready. Readiness has already expressed itself through presence. The work is no longer internal preparation. It is quiet participation. This is where the story closes cleanly. No cliffhangers. No conditions. Just recognition, shared and complete. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it before their timeline closes.